diversity of thought is in demand for boosting collective creativity and harnessing collective wisdom. With that being said, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Hope everyone is safe and sound. Well, I'm Ramya, Assistant Professor from the Department of Human Resource Management, shall be your host for the day. It's my great pleasure to welcome all the dignitaries, faculties, and participants from various institutions for a one-day national level webinar on harnessing generational diversity. It's my privilege to extend a warm welcome to our presenter, Ms. Neeraj Singh, the Teenager Gen Bridger professional speaker on generational diversity. I now call upon Mrs. Niveta Rajit to take over the session. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Ramya. Very good afternoon to one and all present here. Before we commence, the feedback assessment form will be available in the YouTube comment box. You are requested to complete and submit the form before 6 p.m. today. Later, the form will be deactivated. The e-certificate for participation will be sent to your register email immediately. Let's move on. May I now call upon an inspiring personality, Dr. R.J.M., Head of the Department of Human Resource Management, to deliver the welcome address. To you now, ma'am.
Thank you, Niveda. We are all different, which is great because we are all unique. Without diversity, life would be very boring. With this wonderful quote, a very good afternoon to one and all. It's my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to you all for this one-day national level webinar on enhancing generational diversity on behalf of the Department of Human Resource Management, Dr.M.G.R. Educational and Research Institute in your city. Your presence and motivation always makes us happy. Heartfelt gratitude to our founder chancellor, Dr. A.C. Shanmugam, and to our honorable president, engineer A.C.S. Arun Kumar, for their never-ending support and encouragement towards conducting various programs. Hearty welcome to our knowledgeable and a versatile speaker of the day, Neeraj Singh, the teenager, Gen Bridger, a professional speaker on the generational diversity. She is a multi-talented woman who has won gold medal in her master's degree in philosophy. Besides, she has written various books on diversity and she has given more than 100 talks related to generalization diversity. She has 35 years of experience in education and in other various fields. We are so proud and happy to have you today along with us, ma'am. Hearty welcome and thank you for your acceptance and presence today, ma'am. Pleasant welcome to all the participants from all over the world. Pleasure is mine in welcoming and thanking all the executives, deans, HODs, faculty members and all others for motivating us in all the ways. Special thanks to Dr. A.R. Arunachalam, Dean Academics, and Dr. K. Sendil Kumar, Dean Administration, for their wonderful support to us in all the ways. A special thanks and welcome to Mr. Ganesh Babu and Niveda Rajit for their wonderful technical support in making this program a grand success. Diversity is a great force towards creativity. It's an important issue in today's business landscape. More and more, HR departments are being called to handle issues related to diversity, and indeed, entire departments have been formed to make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusions are handled correctly and sensitively. But while many of these programs primarily focuses on issues such as racial or gender diversity, there is one type of diversity that is frequently overlooked, that is generational diversity. Without generational diversity, businesses will find it hard to hire, engage, and keep talent. And while it may not be a newsworthy as other types of diversity, it is no less important to businesses. In fact, a survey of 2018 states that 86% of the workers prefer to work on multi-generational terms. Another survey says that the age-diverse organizations come up with and the dangers of ignoring it run much deeper than that. Generational diversity can negatively impact an employee's performance too. They may feel as though they are not appreciated or communicated effectively or respected. It decreases employee turnover expenses, increases potential client base, and improves succession planning for retirement too. One of the key benefits of generational diversity is knowledge sharing. Generational diversity is not going away. If we want to create long-lasting businesses, we need to tackle the challenges like stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination against people on the basis of their age, generation gap, and many more factors. Overcoming the challenges are not that much easier. How to overcome or tackle the challenges of this generational diversity today? We have a very eminent speaker, Neeraja Singh, along with us to enrich us about this. Hope we all will be enriched after this webinar. So without taking much time, I once again welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, it gives me immense pleasure in introducing our eminent speaker and guest of honor, Ms. Neeraja Singh, who is a woman of virtue and simplicity. I feel elated to introduce her to everyone in this bright sunny day. After all, she's a living inspiration to the young and energetic minds. Our honorary guest is a keynote speaker on generational empathy with 37 years of work experience as an advertising executive, prize winning fiction writer, feature journalist, teacher, documentary, script writer, TV anchor, professional columnist on youth and editor. Miss Neeraja Singh is the senior teenager, a proud Air Force veteran's wife. She enjoys golf, loves her road bicycle that she rode Delhi to Chandigarh around 246 kilometers, and she also enjoys swimming. Our speaker is a qualified in BSc Honors Chemistry from Pune University, Bachelorette in Education from Annamalai University, and MA Philosophy. She's a gold medalist from Guru Nanak Dev University. She has excellent command over the English language, energetic and energizing talk based on extensive research, multidisciplinary backgrounds, insight, deep empathy for the human condition creates and delivers from excitement. Many thanks. I'm humbled and honored for your presence here today, madam. We pray the Almighty to bless you with great success, and on behalf of our department and our university, we wish you good luck in all your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was an outstanding profile. Before we get started, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the comment box. I will bring them up after the presentation. We will also have time for question session at the end. Now, the most awaited time has arrived. Without any further delay, I welcome our guest of honor and speaker for the day, Ms. Neeraja Singh, to proceed with the presentation. Ma'am, we request you to take over the session and enrich us with knowledge. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Ramya. And thank you, Dr. Jayam, the University, MGR. You are my absolutely picture book target audience. You are a research and an educational setup. There are the young and there are the nurturers of the young. I'm very thrilled and excited to be here, and I bring you a message on generational diversity. Dr. Jayam is absolutely right. There is a diversity explosion today. And of all the diversities, I believe, from what I have seen, from what I have read, from what I have researched and written and assimilated, that the most relevant diversity today is generational. And why do I say that? All other diversities are slowly blending because there is so much of inclusivity. Mankind has become far more open. We face a crisis as a species. There is so much uncertainty, the kind that we have never faced before. Now, in facing that uncertainty, there's a lot of push and pull and mingling and blending happening. There is a greater acceptance. With that, as the boundaries break down, to give you an example, the gender boundary is breaking down slowly. We used to have binaries, but there is an entire spectrum today. As these diversities break down, your socio-economic backgrounds are also challenged because we are all connected. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Kunur, whether you're sitting in Wellington, whether you're sitting in Noida like I'm sitting, we're all connected. Does it matter what socio-economic class you come from as long as you are connected? When all those boundaries start to blur, what ultimately begins to matter is what generation are you from? What were your influential events. What music did you grow up listening to? What movies did you watch when you were growing up? What books did you read? What were the major catastrophic events? Was it Indo-Pak War? Was it the Wall Street collapse? Was it the 9/11 incident? Was it an act of terrorism in Mumbai? And for the generation that is right now growing under the cloud of COVID, for them, they are affected for life. So, generational then becomes extremely critical because an entire swath of humanity born between certain years are shaped a certain way. They become a culture. A generation becomes a culture. And that is how generational diversity becomes very relevant. It is important to understand what matters to each generation. Now, there is a second factor which plays a very important role here. The older people are living longer and they are refusing to retire. Look at me. We are quite healthy. Our cardiovascular functions are decent because we didn't grow up staying awake at night. We didn't have the opportunities to experiment as the young children today have. We didn't consume, there was no opportunity. I mean, consume alcohol or substances. It wasn't so accessible. The demographics of a young person who consumes has changed. Once upon a time, there were children who were not performing very well in school, perhaps, but today it is the honor student sometimes who is smoking up, who is numbing his or her anxiety with substances. Now, when that happens, the outcome is different and a new approach to communication is required. That is when it becomes very, very crucial to understand what separates one generation from the other. You cannot afford today to come from a place of assumptions. You cannot assume. You cannot assume that the young want this. You cannot even assume what I want, because today I may not want to retire. You might look at me and say, Madam, you've lived your life. You've got nice gray hair. Why don't you sit back and relax and hand over the reins to the young? But I want to give myself a second chance. This is my second innings. In fact, what I'm doing right now with you is my fifth career. I want to grow, continue expanding, to contribute. And there are many other boomers. I'm a boomer by generation. There are many other boomers like me. And today, the kind of world we live in, there is a place for experience. There is a place for wisdom. There is a place for disloyalty also, in a manner. A lot of young people, employers complain that they don't stick to one company. There's a place for that, because there are other people who will fill in that role, and you can together work like a well-oiled machine, provided you accept, you acknowledge, and you understand, you're willing to negotiate and learn how to understand each other. So that is the context of my talk today. I have put together some slides from all that I have seen in my life and all that I have read. My desire, my aim today, my objective today is that by the end of my talk, each one of you watching me and listening me stops to think, yeah, there was this Nirja Singh, senior teenager, and she said something about generational gaps and how to negotiate that, and maybe I need to rethink. And with that, let's go over to my presentation. Just give me one moment as I share it, and then we will go through all the slides that I have put together for you. Here is my first slide. Harnessing generational diversity at the workplace. Extremely important. We cannot afford to let our differences divide us. The purpose of this presentation is to learn to turn your differences into dividends. And even though I say that this is about work And the workplace, the fact is, even that boundary has begun to blur. What is work? Where does it start? What is workplace? All these things are new ideas today, and we are struggling to accept and work around them. So let's move on and work. I just said, is that a place anymore? Yes, it is in some cases. We are experimenting with a hybrid workplace. But workplace until recently, until yesterday, last year and a half, it was home. It was a tiny table in one corner of your room, and you were sharing your devices with other members of the family. So, work is not a place anymore, strictly speaking, because there are a lot of companies that wound up their offices, that vacated their buildings. They gave up their buildings because they could not afford to maintain them. So, the idea of work is changing. Redundancy. Redundancy happens when certain jobs are not needed anymore. There are so many jobs that have just fallen by the wayside, and there are other jobs, for instance, the legal profession. There are other professions where there is more and more automation happening, and tomorrow perhaps they will not be needed. Schools are under a lot of questioning. Will there be the need of strict brick and mortar schools tomorrow? Are schools going to become irrelevant? These are the new, very, very fundamental, very, very seismic, I would call it, issues that will unravel and pan out with time. Corporate flexibility is critical today because of all these reasons. The corporate is a huge part of the employer landscape. They are the ones who are going to be hiring many of you listening to this. Flexibility there is extremely, extremely important. I'm just laying out the picture. And against this kind of scenario now, what kind of employees are in demand? Quick learners, the go-getters, and hopefully young people who don't need hand-holding for very long. And many of them don't need, because there is so much information and knowledge available online. Knowledge is accessible today. Now there on the screen, you see 3 books. I've written these 3 books on the 3 generations. Silver Surfers is on my generation. No Time to Be Young is on about the millennials mostly. And then my recent most book is on the Generation Z, which is just entering the workforce. And the youngest of them is probably 24. Let me see. I want to introduce this acronym to you. Many of you perhaps are aware of it. There is volatility, there is uncertainty, there is a complexity, and there is an ambiguity in the world that we live in today. It's a VUCA world. It's a VUCA world. It's a VUCA world. It's a VUCA world that we live in. Now, with all this, there is something else. There is a kind of mass delusion. And what is that kind of delusion? We hear people say, we say to each other, or we say to our young children, we tell them, you can be anything you want. Is that the truth? Be your best version. What is that best? Who decides that best? Does LinkedIn profile? Does your profile on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn score decide what's the best? Who decides what your best version is? You see entrepreneurs, the unicorns, you see Peter Thiel, you see Jeff Bezos, you see Mark Zuckerberg, and you see the kind of achievements that they have stacked up. They're talking about immortality. The technical titans are talking about immortality today. Obviously, it puts you in a bit of a self-doubting mode, and you wonder, how could you be that big? And there's, on top of this, an entire entrepreneurial culture. It is the most cool today to be an entrepreneur, but what is the support available to an entrepreneur? And finally, there is a complete collapse of parenting. I say collapse of parenting, collapse of parenting. Parenting has collapsed. Parenting has become confused. Parenting is giving mixed messages. It's frightened. Parents are frightened today. This is the kind of mass delusion that we are experiencing. And it's very, very important under this scenario, the VUCA world and the mass delusion, to understand and appreciate that the stakes, my friends, the stakes have never been higher. The stakes today could involve mental health. It could involve estrangement, alienation from the workplace, from the company, from the family, and in some cases, it can even mean loss of life. Think about it. Look around you. Are there young people who are experiencing all of this? Now, these are two cases I'm just sharing with you because when I talk about the generation gap, I get a pushback from people. My friends tell me, my colleagues tell me, people on the road, people I meet in social functions tell me, it's not such a big deal. There's always been a generation gap. What are you talking about? You're exaggerating. You're being alarmist. Is it a myth? Is it a myth? No, it's not. The generation gap is real. Would you have imagined 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, someone like Rajni Chandy or someone like Greta Thunberg? Could you have imagined a young 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old challenging the European Parliament, standing in the Parliament and angrily telling the leaders, the world's leaders, the state heads, how dare you? How dare you leave a world like this for us to clear up? How dare you expect us to mop up behind you, after you? Would you have imagined that? No, never. Because when I was growing up, the economy was hopeful. The world was hopeful. We trusted institutions. We trusted the presidents, the state heads. It was very different. Then somebody, 70-year-old, 65-year-old, did not dress the way it is shown here on this magazine cover, a beautiful, lovely, fantastic photo shoot. But she was trolled. Rajni was trolled for this. And that is because people are not yet ready to accept that the values are changing, the expectations are changing, that a young person feels empowered enough to question the older, and the older feel encouraged enough to live their lives, to experiment, to be themselves, to explore parts of their lives that they were not able to explore perhaps once. So these are the generational, huge, huge changes in values, in views. And against this background, the answer is, it is not a myth. Now, let's talk about work. What are my premises when you talk about the millennials and the millennial management is a buzzword in the workplace? Number one, the onus, I believe. I do believe that the onus on taking the first step towards a better communication is with the older generation because they are more secure, they are better off, they have the money, they have the security, they have the houses, they are emotionally more stable because they've been in marriages, they've been there, done that, raised families. So the onus is on them. Secondly, you have to accept, everybody has to accept that the world today is harsher, it is more cruel. The world earlier was a little softer. There are reasons, we are not going into that right now. Third, my generation, the one before me also, we are in a real danger, we feel. The older generation feels that they are in danger of leaving behind a generation that is not as healthy as them, that is not as physically as strong as them, that is not emotionally as stable as them, that is not as potent and productive as them. And there are reasons for that. Young people today struggle with anxiety. They struggle with relationships. They struggle with emotional instability many a times. they're taking longer to launch. Many of them, not all of them, we cannot broad brush. And the idea is to just paint a general picture here. So some of it will resonate, you may differ with the nitty gritty of it, but broadly speaking, the younger generations are taking longer to meet the so-called milestones of life. In fact, those milestones are also haywire. And finally, the basic premise that a home, which used to be round, Mother Earth, is not round anymore. Our home has gone flat. We are living in a flat home. So, in all of this, what are the three slippery slopes? What are the areas where there is the risk of maximum conflict? In the workplace, there are three main things. One is stress management, there is expectations management, and finally, there is your work-life balance. Now, to give you an example, stress management. Let me share something with you on stress management. I know you have all heard these three phrases very often, but let's see what it can do. Now, there on the screen, this is my daughter. She studied law, and after that she studied psychology. And like many young people today, she is smart, she is ambitious, she wants to do a lot, she wants to create a lot of impact. Her interest is in social justice, like a lot of young people today. However, because of the inability to manage her stress and other factors I just shared with you, relationships, there is a sexual revolution in our country, whether we like to admit it or not. We may want to brush it under the carpet, but there is. Then the very, very high rate of competition. There is a lot of self-criticism. Young people are harsh with themselves. I mentioned consumption. And to cope with anxiety, you may be drinking alcohol, you may be watching Netflix the entire night, some kind of binge watching. You may be smoking up, you may be using pot, some drugs perhaps. Now, when you're doing all this to manage your stress, you are ending up with some mental health, perhaps stresses. Now, this is a big, big problem. And how do you bridge this difference? Because these things, my generation does not understand. We do not understand depression. If you tell my generation, the response will be, are you nuts? How do you find the time to get depressed? Come on, go. Put on some shoes and start running. Go do some exercise. Go do something else useful. Do something with your time. Don't just sit around moping. And come on, buckle up. Lace your shoes and square up and put your shoulders back and chin up and march. Keep marching, soldiering on. Keep soldiering on. These are the differences. But depression is a real thing today. The darkness of depression is real, my friends. So AAA is not alcohol, Alcohol Anonymous. It is acknowledge, it is accept, it is act, it is act. Whenever an older generation sees someone younger struggling with some mental health issue, the thing is to act upon it, get help. Also remember that today it takes a village to bring up the young. Now I'm talking to an educational and a research setup. You are hugely, hugely invested in the young. You are bringing up, nurturing young lives, potentially promising lives. Very important to remember that it takes a village. It is not just parents. It is the coaches, the uncles and aunts, the tutors, the trainers, the classroom bhaiyas, any help, anybody around. It takes an entire village to raise the children today. Just the parents is not enough because parents are living in nuclear families. It is not working. That formula is not working. People today, young people today need a much bigger support system. Fortunately, in India, we still have some remnants of that. And we should be careful, learn lessons from what other cultures and societies are experiencing, and then decide what we want to hold on to. Many a times in families in India, we like to be on our own. Not a good idea. It's very important to stay connected with uncles and aunts, with the rest of the family, with the larger society, with the neighbors. Finally, the third point, you have to step back. You cannot micromanage because young people, remember, we are bringing them up to be independent, to be objective, to be critical. You cannot teach them all these values and then tell them, go there because I'm telling you to go. Do this because I'm telling you to do. That's not going to work. So you have to take a step back, but always, always with the intention of being an ally. Ally. Write it in capital letters. Allyship is a big thing today. You have to be an ally. Let's move on to the second slippery slope. I talked about expectations management. Now look at your screen. Those young, beautiful, happy, expectant, cheerful faces. They are hyper-connected. They are anxious. They have a very keen bullshit meter. Don't bullshit to them. They can tell when you're bullshitting. Don't talk a lot of big words and some thoughts and some philosophies which are just not making sense to them. They will tell you it's not making sense today. Unlike my generation, they are also very aware of our disdain. They know. They know that we think they're not working hard enough or they're not focused enough, or perhaps they should be getting 98% and they're getting only 97%. So disdain, they are aware. And they also are watching age inappropriate content today. I have no hesitation in saying pornography is the word. Age inappropriate content is crawling, snaking on the internet. And young people are watching it. Overly stimulated, and they're struggling with low self-esteem. Now you have to ask yourself, I have to ask myself, why are they struggling with low self-esteem? The parents today are supportive, quite progressive. They will do anything for their children, and yet they have all the resources. The young suffer low self-esteem. There's a lot of comparison. And not necessarily from their families. There's comparison on social media. And now look at these managers. I was doing a session with them, and I found there is lack of information. They also feel irrelevant. The managers who are about 45-year-old, who've got small children, they're trying to bring up a family, but when they come to work and they're onboarding the next generation, the younger generation, they feel they're not succeeding with them. And that starts to make them feel low, a kind of a depressed feeling. And they're struggling. How do they connect? What do they do? What do they say? How do they say it so that their message reaches the young people? Some of them told me that they try watching the same serials that the young people are watching so that they can discuss it with them. They feel prescriptive. They feel they are all the time, telling them, do this, do that. It doesn't work like that. The communication is passive aggressive. There's a lot of micromanaging, and again, the same confusion that is happening in homes is happening at work also in a manner, because you're giving them mixed messages. You say, oh, you're completely, I'm willing to give you a lot of space and freedom. But what happens if one of your young employees, you give them a project and they outsource it to somebody else in their circle who is better at it? And this person is sitting and watching, maybe checking his social media. What is the reaction of the manager going to be? What happens in a company gathering where young people do not switch their cameras on? How important is it? Are there managers who insist on it? What happens if a young person sends a manager, a senior person, a WhatsApp message, which is a little terse, and the older person feels disrespected? So these are the things that a lot of people at work, a lot of generations are struggling with. How do you bridge these differences? Well, I do believe you should offer a narrative. And when I say narrative, I mean in a company, it would be a story about your company. When you're onboarding, give them a sense of context. What is the company about? It is done in many companies. It should be done in institutions, small, big organizations, anywhere, even in homes. Give them a narrative which gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of pride, a sense of connection. Okay, this is the context. This is what this company is about. And I'm privileged to be working in this company. The problem is that we've never given the young any narrative. All the narratives they have absorbed from the airwaves. And a lot of those airwaves waves are choked with foreign content, largely American. There's not much literature out there from Indian authors for the young. Get into the trenches. It is a war. I believe this is a war today for the colonization of young minds. I'm not exaggerating. This is a war today for the minds of the young. So you need to get into the trenches, which means don't stay away and tell them things. Get into it with them. Try and listen to the music. Try and see what they're doing on Reddit. Sometimes they share. Understand what their motivations and compulsions and desires are, what their ambitions are. And be ready to defend with logic and reason every time. Anytime you want to defend, it better be with reason and logic. In all my presentation, I am working from the presumption that the onus is on the older people, but the onus is on the younger also. The majority of the onus is on the older, but the onus is on the younger as well. And that I will mention as we go along. Now, this is the third thing that I mentioned, work-life balance. Now, what happens when there is no work-life balance? Remember, I said generational diversity is so critical today because the stakes can be of literally a life. Now, this happened in 2013. That's my husband and I. He retired from the Air Force. This crash happened in the Barmer district of Rajasthan in 2013. And it was a 25-year-old pilot who lost his life in that crash. Very, very tragic. It really, really shook me. Because the reason, it's not that crashes had not happened in the past or that we had not experienced it in front of us, but this particular reason was social media addiction. This young person was chatting with his girlfriend at night on WhatsApp, and nobody knew. Now, generational diversity, when you are working together, when you are in charge of the younger people, when there is an entire environment and you're thinking a lot of things, policies, for instance, you have to be aware of the ambient environment. Your ambient awareness needs to be very, very sharp. You need to know what are the tools and the technologies, the practices, what are the work habits. The children who sometimes are up at night. Today, 24 hours just blend. There's no day and night. And I'm not just talking about the BPO workers. I'm talking about a general lifestyle. So this is an example of what happens when a work-life balance is not maintained because of lack of awareness of the generational habits. And how can you bridge this difference? Inform yourself. Number one, anticipate. Anticipate that 20 years from now, AI is going to be a big thing. It already is creeping up on us. But how is it likely to impact our lives? So it's for the generations, for people who are working with the generations, who are supervising them, to stay informed of what the big ideas of tomorrow are. So that exercise is critical. Then stay relevant. If you're not up to date with things, you won't have much to talk about with the younger generation, for instance. So it's important to stay relevant. Only then will they be open to anything you say to them. I have young, my children are 31 and 27. They're 2.5 years apart. And I try all the time to, well, the way I stay relevant is I collect skills. So I'm collecting a new skill every time. If I know, for instance, I knew the breaststroke in swimming. And last season I learned the freestyle, I learned the backstroke, I learned the butterfly. I started learning social dancing before COVID struck. And I was meeting a lot of young people there. We would be doing salsa together or foxtrot together. I started learning Spanish language. And I was the eldest in my class. And the youngest, they were 18-year-old, 19-year-olds, 25. I think the next older one was 28. And after that, they were younger. So stay relevant. You need to keep learning and moving with the times to stay current. And this one, You have heard about boomers, my generation, the Gen X that came later, 65 born until about 80 born, then the millennials from 80 to about 95, then the Zoomers that were born between 95 and 2012, and the children born after 2012 are what you call Gen Alpha. I'm talking about Generation V. This is a new generation. And this is a very, very unique generation. It's Generation Virtual. Generation Virtual is very different. They live on the flat environment. They all behave like each other. If you hadn't seen me today, and you and I just met online, and if I'd said I'm 18-year-old, it would be hard for you to know the truth. It's easy. It's easy to be what you like online. So many times, this generation, no matter what their age is, they behave like each other online. They are not defined by age, by gender, or by geography. Doesn't matter where you are from. Doesn't matter. You could be all part of one community. You could be playing a game together somewhere online. You could be exploring the dark web sometimes. You could be shopping together. You could be exchanging notes. You could be engaging in conversations. You could be doing a fireside chat, a digital fireplace around a digital camp fire. There's so many opportunities to connect with people. See, my generation, many of us are learning new technology. So there are many older people who are online. Now, these people, the Generation V, they are the digital natives. And it's important for the bosses at the workplace to understand this, that under all the other differences, there is this underlying theme. They are all communicators. Today, you don't need Doordarshan or the government to approve your script. If you have a good script, you can create your own YouTube channel. Everybody can be a creator today. That barrier has come down. There's no middle person who's gatekeeper, who's holding you back. So you can create your content and put it out there. And this generation creates a lot of content. They're constantly creating, they're curating, they're connecting. They also believe in merit and collaboration. This generation wants to be a part of an active community that is creating an impact, that is doing something important. So you'll find them on Facebook, you'll find them in a lot of places. There are parents who are coming together to do some good things. There are speakers who are coming together, all kinds of categories, and you would have come across them. So Generation V is a generation which gradually in future you should read up on it, on where this is likely to go. But it's an important factor to keep in mind. Also remember, this is happening. Internet of Thing is transforming into Internet of Thought. I won't need the mouse again very soon. I won't need my earphones perhaps. I won't need my devices. I just have to use my brainwaves, my neurotransmitters, and we are all connected. So this mastermind that is coming up, this cloud computing that is coming up, where everything is connected, and in the blink of an eye, at just a thought, you can bring about you can control the physical environment. So the line between physical and the virtual, that blurring, that is also something to watch out for. You already hear of some of these very, very successful entrepreneurs uploading their memories into the cloud. I mentioned the immortality part of it, that is already moving. It's moving ahead. We don't know what shape it is taking, but it is moving. So when this happens, it's going to affect the way we conduct our lives in very, very fundamental ways. So it's important to keep pace with the big ideas and then see how it is going to affect all the generations. I would recommend this particular movie if you have not watched it already. This is The Intern, a classic movie, and it's a very beautiful portrayal of how successful an intergenerational communication or a partnership can be. There you see, and I won't tell you, you will have to watch it. My narrating the story will not be the same, but do try and watch it if you're interested in understanding generational diversity better. So this is the potential of reverse mentoring. You would have come across this phrase, reverse mentoring, how the young can teach the old and the old can bring their wisdom and their experience of how people can be better team players, for instance. Sometimes in companies, some middle level managers might feel irrelevant because they cannot use technology. But if a company is sensitive to age diversity, there could be a conscious policy decision, institutional attempt to have that person upskill and come up so that there can be mutual productivity. This is a very, very iconic figure. The OK Boomer story started from here. This young MP in New Zealand, she was so fed up of the older generation messing with the climate. She was trying to talk about the climate and she was heckled by an older MP, and she's OK Boomer, OK Boomer. And that led to this whole fest of memes. My book is called OK Zoom, OK Gen Z. I thought of calling it OK Zoomer, but OK Boomer is the name of my Facebook page on generational diversity. Now remember, future economy, knowledge transfer, succession planning, all these hang upon an awareness of generational diversity. It's important to understand the gaps, the assumptions, the ways you can cover up those gaps and communicate so that knowledge transfer is better, so that young people are trained to play their roles in the economy of the future, and that succession planning happens in a better manner because the attrition rate is high. The employability, the turnability is more, the turnover is more, and usually succession used to go to the senior people, but it doesn't have to be like that anymore. These are issues that are covered under generational diversity. And my final word on this entire subject would be at work, particularly, and at home also, everywhere, we have to build cultures of respect and civility. Respect is very important, mutual respect. It's also important to negotiate any politics with grace. There are certain things between generations which are awkward, certain things which are unacceptable. Those need to be clearly defined. And reverse mentoring, the most needs to be made of that. And we also have to be extremely ready to improvise. Between awkward and unacceptable, for instance, your dress code, spaghettis might be awkward, but what is completely unacceptable? What kind of an outfit? What kind of what kind of a punctuality? How particular you are going to be? These are things that have to be defined. And finally, remember, above all, between the generations, it is a sense of connection. I do believe today that there is an unresolved grief in society because milestones are not being met, and there is a sense of mutual disappointment, mutual angst, and that can only be solved with a sense of connection. This is what I do. I mentioned generational disconnect can cause estrangement, mental health, and even loss of life. So solve generational dilemmas, be on the same page, no matter what your age. That's my Calendly link, should any of you wish to meet up with me. And now I've stopped sharing and I'm open to any questions, please. Thank you, Dr. Jem, very much. I hope this was of some help.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for an enriching session. It was very lively with your wonderful examples. Thank you so much. Dear participants, if you have any queries or questions to ask, you can post the same in the comment box.
And Dr. Jem, if we have time, I can continue I see that we are on 52 minutes. I'll leave that up to you. Should you want me to continue, I can share a little more. But I thought I would leave some time for questions. And I'd love to hear some views from the other side. That'll be great for me to work upon.
Sure, ma'am. As of now, there is no question. So if you wish, you can continue with your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you,
Now,
ma'am.
thank you, Dr. Jem. I'll take another couple of minutes and then perhaps we can wind up. I hear at there is I want to talk about the generational grief a little more. A lot of young people today, for instance, are take longer to settle down. They're taking longer to get married, or they want to go into the mountains sometimes. They just want time alone with them and not have the family pressurize them. Their need for community approval may not be as strong as it was for my generation. So many a times what happens is the older generation at work, bosses and seniors, they will either they may fight in the sense they may communicate in some very strong terms, in a very hierarchical, patriarchal term, or they just might back off, or they might withdraw and not have a conversation any longer. That is fighting, fleeing. These are dangerous because in with the generations working together at the workplace, it's very important to have keep the conversation communication lines open. I met a young professional who told me that she was in therapy, but her mother was very unhappy about that. And she said, why do you need to be in therapy? We never needed therapy. So that understanding and appreciation that the challenges the young face are very different from what we faced. And therefore, there needs to be a greater acceptance and a willingness to take a step back and not keep pushing and micromanaging them at work. Of course, the other question then from the other side, it becomes how far can we permit that? How far can you take that laxity? At some point or the other, you have to spell out certain things. So, what I did was I started reading up and I realized that the only form of culture or workplace culture that perhaps will suit everybody is a very transactional method. Let's call it a transactional leadership. Now, what happens in a transactional leadership? You lay down your rules very, very strictly. The procedures, the protocols are spelled out in clear terms, and the reward is in terms of money. It is a very clear cut, and you may be given an option to work independently or in a very, very hierarchical setup. So that option is there. However, this kind of a leadership style will work only for short term goals, but you might end up killing creativity. If everything is so strictly laid down, it will suit all the generations will be happy with this. It's a safe way of working. There are clear cut rules, the rewards are assured, and it's coming in well in form of money, which is a language that everybody understands. But like I said, in an environment where you cannot afford to be what is called addicted to certainty. All of us have grown up, most of us. We are addicted to certainty. We want to be certain. What's your plan? What's your objective? What are your goals? Give me the tips and the tools. We want to be sure. You're always striving for certainty, but that certainty today is the most uncertain thing. Therefore, that kind of leadership is perhaps not working. It will not apply. And hence the need for this constant dialogue. So I will congratulate you, Dr.M.G.R, that you are holding this webinar, that you invited me. You started out by saying that diversity issues that are usually dealt with have to do with gender, with ethnic differences. But you took this very, very progressive step of inviting me here to talk on generational diversity, because that is a first step. That conversation, that acknowledgement that this is crucial, and understanding each other is the only way to move forward. With that, I'm closing my webinar today, and I look forward to hearing from some of you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there on all the platforms. You just Google Neerja Singh Teenager, and my LinkedIn profile will come up, and it would be fantastic. Thank you so much, MGR, and good luck with nurturing the next generation. Thank you, Dr. J.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering a wonderful and informative session. The session was highly successful in the sense that reached all the participants effectively and helped them to understand more on generational diversity. At this happy moment, we would like to present our appreciation letter to the chief guest. I request Mrs. Neveta Rajit to display the appreciation letter. Over to you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. With that being said, I now call upon Mrs. K. Vasanthi, Deputy Dean of Academic Staff College and Assistant Professor from the Department of Human Resource Management, is eagerly waiting to deliver out of thanks. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Ramya. Gratitude is not only the greatest virtue, but the parent of others. With these warm words, I would like to propose the vote of thanks. I would like to express my gratitude to our management for giving us this opportunity to have this webinar continuously. I extend my gratitude to our guest speaker, Ms. Neerja Singh, professional speaker on gender diversity. Today's topic, harnessing generational diversity, has been a challenge to all organizations across the globe, and organizations have met the challenges by related to the differences, related to differences in the human resources, and they have also given the change in generational diversity and the challenges are met by the organization. The key communication is to communicate openly, honestly, and transparently. I'm sure all the participants will take the cue from our guest speaker today, given an expressional and an exponential talk on generational diversity. I would like to place on record my sincere thanks for all the participants who have registered to this program. I thank our joint registered Humanities and Sciences, Mr. Prabhu, Dean Dr. Adayalampattu and Dean Dr. Kumar for their unseen support. Thanks to my head of the department, Dr. J, and my colleagues, Ms. Ramya, Ms. Neveta, and Ms. Deepa for answering this program. Thanks to Mr. Ganesh Babu and tech support, and Ms. Neveta who handled this program. As we come to the end of the program, I wish all the participants a pleasant evening. I'm hoping to see you all in the next program. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Dear participants, the feedback assessment form is available in the YouTube comment box. You are requested to complete and submit the form before today 6 p.m. Later, the form will be deactivated. The easy participation will be sent to register email immediately. Hope we have come to the end of the program. Hope everyone has gained knowledge. With the satisfaction of presenting good webinar, we wish to sign off and meet you all in the next program. Don't forget to submit your feedback form and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dr.M.G.R. University Face Digital Learning, and also follow our department Instagram, Dr.M.G.R. HRM 2019, Facebook, Dr.M.G.R. HRM, Twitter, Dr.M.G.R. HRM 2019 for further updates about programs and videos. Thank you. See you all in the next program. Thank you.
Dr.M.G.R. Educational and Research Institute, University, Mother of all Chennai. Dr.M.G.R Educational and Research Institute, University, Mother of All, Chennai.